Hello students, my name is Nidhi Singh and I am from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Hyderabad. In the current module, we will be learning about male and female family planning methods from the paper Fertility. The learning objectives of this module would be to understand more about the male methods of conception control and female methods of conception control. Contraceptive methods are by definition preventive methods to help women avoid unwanted pregnancies. These include all temporary and permanent measures to prevent pregnancy resulting from coitus. The term conventional contraceptives are used to denote those methods that require action at the time of sexual intercourse. Each contraceptive method has its unique advantages and disadvantages. The success of any contraceptive method depends on only its effectiveness in preventing pregnancy, but also on the rate of continuation of its proper use. The contraceptive methods may be broadly grouped into two classes: spacing methods and terminal methods, which we'll discuss in detail now. The use or non-use of contraceptives has been mentioned earlier as one of the conception variables in the course of discussion on the various intermediate variables through which fertility is affected in any society. With the launching of large-scale family planning programs by several national governments with a view of controlling population growth, the use of contraceptives as a measure of controlling fertility has gained importance. In this section, the various methods of birth control will be described and the following terms will be used interchangeably: method of conception control, contraception or contraceptive methods, birth control methods, and family planning methods. As a social practice, family planning is old in the sense that knowledge of contraceptives in some form or the other has existed for centuries. Norman Himes, who compiled a medical history of contraception in the late 1960s, provided ample evidence to prove that man attempted to control the increase in his numbers even before the dawn of written history. Though most of the measures used in primitive societies would today be termed as positive or death-producing checks, for example, infanticide. Preventive or the birth-limiting checks were also used, abortion being the most important among them. Some methods of conception control, however, were also practiced even among these pre-literate people, though they could be termed mainly as magical. Even in Sanskrit literature of ancient India, there are several references to what Himes calls contraceptive receipts. In this section, only those methods of conception control will be briefly described which have relevance to the discussion on fertility, as well as those which may be termed as modern methods of conception control. While several methods of conception control are available today, none of them really satisfy the simple criteria for the ideal birth control method should be harmless, reliable, and acceptable. Acceptability of any method is generally high when its use is not associated with sexual intercourse. The factor of cost also needs to be taken into consideration, for an ideal birth control method should be cheap. Though it is possible to classify the various methods of conception control in several ways, the classification followed here will be based on whether man or woman is required to use the method. Now we'll discuss about the male methods of conception control. The first one is coitus interrupts. This method, which literally means interrupted sexual intercourse, is perhaps the oldest method of contraception known to mankind. It requires a man to withdraw his penis from the vagina just before his semen is ejaculated, so that the semen is not deposited in the vaginal canal. This method is known as the withdrawal method. The main advantage of this method is that it does not call for any preparation or equipment, and of course, it does not cost anything. Its main disadvantage is that it creates a certain amount of tension in both the partners. For the effectiveness of the method depends on the efficiency with which the male partner is able to withdraw at the right moment. As pointed out by Guttmacher, if he fails by even a split second to withdraw before ejaculation, the possibility of pregnancy is great. Depositing even a drop of semen in the vagina may cause pregnancy, since the first few drops contain the greatest concentration of spermatozoa. When well understood and practiced correctly by highly motivated couples, however, this method is found to be fairly effective. Condom. The condom, first described by Fallopians, an Italian anatomist in 1564, is known by several names, the most common among them being French letter. In India, the brand name for condoms subsidized by the government is Nirodh. The condom is made of vulcanized rubber and provides a covering for the penis. The main advantage of the condom are that it is cheap, easily available, reliable, harmless, and may be used without medical supervision. Some couples, however, object to the use of condom from the aesthetic point of view. The next is male sterilization or vasectomy. This is a simple operation which involves tying, cutting, and removing portions of the vas deferentia, the tubes which carry the sperms from the testis. Vasectomy is a quick operation which may be carried out under local anesthesia, and recovery from the operation is generally quite rapid. It does not affect the libido or the ability to participate in sexual intercourse. It may be noted that after vasectomy, a man should have about 10 ejaculation before his semen is completely free of sperms. It is therefore absolutely essential for a couple, when the husband has been vasectomized, to use some contraceptive method for some time or till the semen sample is found to be negative for sperms. Though advancement in surgical techniques have now made it possible to reserve this operation through a recanalization of the vas, vasectomy for all practical purposes is to be understood as being permanent method of conception control. Now we will discuss some of the female methods of conception control. The first one is the rhythm method. This method, which is also known as the safe period method, involves restricting sexual intercourse to the infertile phase of women's menstrual cycle. It is based on the following biological facts. First, only one egg, also known as ovum, is normally released during each menstrual cycle, and this egg has an active cycle of about 12 hours, during which it is capable of being fertilized by a sperm. Second, the sperm has an active life of about 48 hours, during which it is capable of fertilizing an ovum. And third, it follows from the above two facts that conception can normally occur during about 60 hours in each menstrual cycle, and if no sexual intercourse takes place during this period, pregnancy may be avoided. The successful practice of this method depends on the accuracy with which the period during which conception is likely to occur is determined. This period is generally of 2.5 days, 2 days before ovulation and half a day after it, taking into account the active life of the sperm and the ovum. If the time of ovulation is known, it is easy to practice this method. Ovulation normally takes place 12 to 16 days before the menstrual period begins. As the safe period has to be determined on the basis of the next menstrual period, it becomes difficult to determine it accurately if reliance is placed only on the probable date of the next menstruation. There are two ways in which the safe period, that is, The period during which a woman will not become pregnant may be determined. The first one is the calendar method and the second one is the temperature method. Now we will discuss the calendar method first. After keeping a record of the menstrual cycle for 12 months, a woman identifies her shortest and her longest cycles. She subtracts 18 days from her shortest cycle and determines the first fertile day of her cycle. Then she subtracts 11 from her longest cycle and determines the last fertile day of her cycle. This calculation may be explained by the following illustration. After maintaining a record for 12 months, suppose a woman finds that her shortest cycle was 27 and her longest cycle was 29. Then the ninth day, that is 27 minus 18, becomes the first fertile day and the 18th day, that is 29 minus 11, becomes her last fertile day. Thus, sexual intercourse should be avoided from 9th to the 18th day of the menstrual cycle, that is during the fertile or the unsafe period if pregnancy is not desired. A simple variation of the calendar method is to allow sexual intercourse only during the first and the last week of the menstrual cycle and allow a longer period of abstinence. The calendar method of practicing the rhythm is useful for those women who menstruate fairly regular but do not allow for occasional irregularities. This method, however, cannot be applied immediately after delivery, during lactation, and when a woman is approaching her menopause. The second method is the temperature method. It has been found that the body temperature of a woman is quite low after menstruation cycle and may fall still lower on the day of ovulation, after which it starts rising and remains high until a day or two before the menstruation begins, and then drops again when the menstruation begins. It is possible for a woman to determine the time of ovulation by taking her temperature every day with the help of a specially designed thermometer which shows the slightest variations. The temperature has to be taken every morning as soon as the woman wakes up, before she gets out of bed or indulges in any activity. She must record the temperature on a chart. She must also learn how to read and interpret the monthly charts correctly, allowing for a change due to illness, emotional disturbances, or changes in climate. Sexual intercourse is allowed only during the post-ovulatory phase if pregnancy is not desired. Now we will look into the mechanical and chemical contraceptives. The first one is the diaphragm. This provides a mechanical barrier to the sperms by covering the entrance to the uterus. It is made of soft rubber in the shape of shallow cup with a flexible metal spring or coil at the circular outer edge. The diaphragm is generally used along with the contraceptive jelly or cream to make it more effective. It is inserted up to 3 hours before intercourse and must be kept in place for at least 6 hours after intercourse. The diaphragm and jelly method is completely harmless and is quite effective when used. It is acceptable because it does not interfere with the sexual act. This method, however, is rather cumbersome and calls for the supervision of toilet facilities in the home. The chemical contraceptives. Several types of contraceptive creams, jellies, and tablets may be used without any mechanical device which acts as chemical barriers as well as spermicides. The foam tablet is one such chemical contraceptive. It is inserted in the vagina about 15 minutes before intercourse. It disintegrates when it comes in contact with the normal moisture of the vagina, produces a rich foam which covers the entrance to the uterus and blocks the way of sperms. It contains a spermicidal which destroys the sperms. Foam tablets are cheap and are less expensive than contraceptive creams or jellies. Their use does not require the service of a doctor, and they are also quite harmless. The intrauterine device, also known as IUD. The first reference to an intrauterine device is found in a medical journal in 1909, in which Richard Richter described the use of a flexible ring of silkworm gut to be placed in the uterus of a woman for contraceptive purposes. In 1929, Raffenberg wrote about an IUD made initially out of silkworm gut and later of silver wire. In the initial stages, the intrauterine contraception was not favored by the medical fraternity. In 1959, however, Oppenheimer described his experience of 20 years with various IUDs, and Ishihama gave an account of the experience of 20,000 women in Japan with the Ota ring. Interest was once again generated in intrauterine contraceptive, and the first international conference on IUD was held in New York in 1962 to reassess its value. IUDs now come in different shapes and sizes and are generally made from a soft, cylindrically shaped plastic or polythene or from the nickel chromium alloy. The more commonly used IUDs are the Lipus loops and the copper T. It is not exactly known how the IUD functions as a contraceptive. Several ideas are put forward as possible explanations. Oral contraception. Popularly known as the pill, oral contraception was first used in Puerto Rico in 1956. It has since then become extremely popular all over the world. If taken regularly, the pill is most reliable contraceptive available today. It contains synthetic ovarian hormones like substances and has three definite effects. 1. The pill inhibits ovulation and completely rules out the possibility of conception, since there is no ovum which can be fertilized by the sperm. 2. The development of the endometrium is impaired, making it unsuitable for the embedding of the fertilized ovum. And 3. The cervical mucus becomes thick and hostile to penetration by the sperms. The reason for high acceptability of the pill in several countries are: first, the pill is very reliable. Second, it is easy to take. Third, it results in highly regular periods if taken correctly, and the bleeding which occurs when the use of the pill is discontinued is quite scanty. Fourth, it is convenient to take once the habit is well established. Fifth, its use is unrelated to the sex act. Now let us discuss female sterilization. It involves the tying of the fallopian tubes, tubal ligation, to interrupt the path through which the ovum passes on its way to the uterus. This ligation prevents the sperms from reacting the ovum, thus cancelling out all the chances of pregnancy. It is possible to remove the uterus or ovaries both in order to sterilize a woman. A sterilized woman has no need to use any contraceptive following tubal ligation. Normally, the sterilized woman does not suffer from any after effects. She continues to ovulate and menstruate as usual, for hormonal production is not affected. As in the case of the unejaculated sperms, The released ova are absorbed. Let us now discuss the advantages that have been made in the contraceptive technology. The search of an ideal contraceptive is still on. Considerable funds all over the world are being spent on research in contraceptive technology with a view to discover new technologies and improving the already existing ones. The once-a-month injection tablets, the implant of capsules, intramuscularly or subcutaneously, providing protection from 6 to 12 months, and post-coital preparations are some of the innovations in the field of contraception which are being tried out. Many of these, however, are still at the stage of clinical trials. Interestingly enough, not much progress has been made in systematic contraceptive methods for males, which are both effective as well as acceptable. Induced abortion. Though strictly speaking, induced abortion is not to be considered as a method of contraception, it needs to be considered in the context of family planning, because the need to determine an unwanted pregnancy arises only when contraceptive measures have not been used at all or have not been used correctly. Abortion means the expulsion of the fruit of conception before the 28 weeks of gestation when the fetus is not viable, that is, when the fetus is not capable of independent existence outside its mother. Abortion may be either spontaneous, that is accidental, or induced. Several countries today have laws which may be considered liberal with respect to induced abortion. The position varies from country to country. It is available virtually for the asking in the USSR and India, where the law is liberal enough to encompass most of the conditions under which a woman would seek abortion. To conclude, we can say that contraceptive methods include all temporary and permanent measures to prevent unwanted pregnancies. The contraceptive methods may be broadly divided into two classes: spacing methods and terminal methods. As a social practice, family planning has existed for centuries. Measures termed as positive checks or death-producing checks existed in primitive societies, for example, infanticide. The simple criteria for the ideal birth control method should be harmless, reliable, and acceptable. Among the male methods of contraception, coitus interruptus is the oldest method known to mankind. It requires a man to withdraw his penis from the vagina just before the semen is ejaculated so that the semen is not deposited in the vaginal canal. This method is also known as the withdrawal method. The next method is condom. It is made of vulcanized rubber and provides a covering for the penis. The condom is a cheap, easily available, reliable and harmless method, and it may also be used without any medical supervision. Male sterilization or vasectomy is a simple operation which involves tying, cutting and removing portions of the vas deferentia, the tubes which carry the sperms from the testis. The female methods of conception control include rhythm method, which involves restricting sexual intercourse to the infertile phase of women's menstrual cycle. It is based on the biological fact that conception can normally occur during about 60 hours in each menstrual cycle, and if no sexual intercourse takes place during this period, pregnancy can be avoided. There are two ways in which the safe period, that is the period during which a woman will not become pregnant, may be determined: the calendar method and the temperature method. Both the methods demand that sexual intercourse should be avoided during the fertile or the unsafe period if pregnancy is not desired. A simple variation of the calendar method is to allow intercourse only during the first and the last week of the menstrual cycle and allow a longer period of abstinence. The mechanical and chemical contraceptives for women include the diaphragm, which provides a mechanical barrier to the sperms by covering the entrance to the uterus. Chemical contraceptives. Several types of contraceptive creams, jellies and tablets may be used without any mechanical device, which act as chemical barriers as well as spermicidals. The IUD. IUDs come in many different shapes and sizes and are generally made from a soft cylindrically shaped plastic or from the nickel chromium alloy. Oral contraception, popularly known as the pill, this is the most reliable contraceptive available today. It contains synthetic ovarian hormone-like substances which inhibit ovulation, also impairs the development of endometrium and thickens the cervical mucus. All of these actions that make the fertilization of an egg by the sperm impossible, and thus pregnancy is avoided. Female sterilization. It involves the tying of the fallopian tubal ligation to interrupt the path through which the ovum passes on its way to the uterus. This ligation prevents the sperms from reaching the ovum, thus cancelling out all chances of pregnancy. It is also possible to remove the uterus or ovaries both in order to sterilize a woman, but such operations are generally performed only when these organs are diseased. Female sterilization must, however, be considered a major operation in comparison with male sterilization. Female sterilization for all purposes is irreversible. Induced abortion. Though it is not a method of contraception, it is to be considered as a family planning method to determine about the unwanted pregnancies. The choice of techniques for terminating pregnancy is influenced primarily by the duration of the pregnancy, the general physical condition of the women, and the size of the uterus. Thank you.